I get puzzled. With a 15-year-old daughter, I'm constantly swamped. Since she never tells me, Simon Gallup has never been in the spotlight. He avoids lengthy interviews, doesn't sing lead vocals, and rarely appears alone on magazine covers. However, The Cure's bass lines provoke deep sadness every time they perform, a feeling words cannot express. Simon has been the calm but steady musical soul from A Jungle to Fascination Street, Disintegration to Wish. Lost Generation's post-punk and gothic rock heartbeat. He helped Robert Smith deliver sorrowful stories through English Fog as well as hold The Cure together. The bass guitar's backstory? Those gloomy eyes. A scandal-free, uneasy life. A man who left the band without saying a word, lost his first love, and declared it over just to return silently. Simon Gallup's story is told in silence in this video. A life of loyalty, pain, and unmistakable song. Duxhurst, a sleepy Surrey village, was the birthplace of Simon Jonathan Gallup on June 1, 1960. Simon, the youngest of 6 children with 4 elder brothers and a younger sister, was raised in a quiet home. From an early age, he learned to listen more than speak and observe more than argue, which would later define him on stage. Dependable and quiet. His family moved to Horley, a small village south of London near Crawley, in 1961. Simon attended the local primary school and Horley Comprehensive School from 1965 to the mid-1970s. There were no artists in his family. No one expected the meek, bespectacled boy to join a gothic rock band that defined its soul. Simon didn't attend college after graduating in 1976. He immediately started working at a local plastic industry. A simple life of working by day and playing music at night nurtured a genuine musical spirit. Simon took a different approach in a society where most young people competed for attention by letting his music speak. Simon played bass in Lockjaw, a local punk rock band, in the late 1970s, giving him his first live experience. He became pals with Robert Smith, The Cure's soul, here. Both were born in small communities and carried the working class's muted discontent, like the English fog. Simon Gallup was neither poor nor abused as a child. However, that humdrum routine and a sensitive and quiet soul made an artist unique. Someone who wasn't rebellious or loud. He needed only a bass guitar and grief at his disposal. Early work. Simon Gallup was 19 when an unexpected invitation transformed his life in 1979. The Cure's original bassist, Michael Dempsey, left. Robert Smith, who was just leaving the underground scene, needed someone to grasp his enigmatic, melancholy music. Simon was his lone confidant. Simon Gallup, with his unkempt hair, black leather jacket, and reclusive demeanor, joined The Cure as a long-lost member. From the 1980 album 17 Seconds, his presence was pivotal. Bass was no longer just rhythm, it became the band's second lead. The chilling and hypnotic masterpiece A Forest, with Simon's dark bass line, is regarded the gothic rock era's opening. Simon played on 17 Seconds, Faith, and Pornography from 1980 to 1982. In a triptych of eerie 1980s music, The Cure moved from harsh post-punk to dismal introspective and artistically tortured soundscapes. Simon stood behind Robert Smith but never in his shadow, at the center of it all. Simon explored depth, unlike punk bassists who valued speed, simplicity, and raw intensity. The rich atmosphere was created by sluggish, brooding riffs that repeated like breath, stretching emotions like strings. He, not a studio technician, created The Cure's sound, which made listeners feel like they were drifting through loneliness in a dreamscape with no way out. Beyond the musical synchronization, Simon and Robert's friendship began to fracture. The brotherly duo was tested by constant touring, creative strain, and internal tensions. Robert, who was taking over the band, felt alone even among his closest friends as Simon's quiet became a wall. As The Cure entered its darkest era with the Pornography album in 1982, everything was ready for an explosion. And it happened at a Strasbourg bar where a seemingly pointless altercation caused Simon Gallup's biggest career break. Fractures, fallout, 1982 separation, silent reappearance. May 1982. The Cure were touring to promote Pornography, their darkest, most intense, and most haunting album. Music was no longer an outlet. It became a scream from within, trapping the band in a psychological spiral with no way out. Robert Smith and Simon Gallup, 2 former pals, were at the center of the extended tour, drink, sleeping drugs, and emotional instability that spread like a virus. Everything culminated one night in Strasbourg, France. A bar tab dispute escalated into a fight between Smith and Gallup. No cameras, no official announcements, but everyone knew something had broken. On stage, The Cure worked well together, but under the gloomy lights, they no longer looked like bandmates. 2 weeks later, Gallup's friend and aide Gary Biddles abruptly appeared on stage in Brussels and accused Robert Smith and drummer Lol Tolhurst of being fake, egotistical, and unreal. Silent Gallup stood near him. Robert took the quiet harder than a punch. That night was their last performance in over 2 years. Without a news release, Simon Gallup left The Cure. No interviews or explanations. In order to escape Robert Smith's surroundings, he founded Fool's Dance, a tiny band for emotional relief. Robert cycled between The Cure lineups during that time. However, without Simon, the band's sound weakened. The 1984 peak had its moments, but fans felt a void, as if the band's heartbeat had disappeared. As usual, Simon Gallup returned quietly, without announcements, conditions, or hoopla. The Cure sought a bassist for their forthcoming tour in late 1984. Simon agreed, not because everything was forgiven or his pride had healed, but because the music was still there and he had never left it. He changed things with his reappearance. Simon's bass was evident on the Head on the Door, 1985, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, 1987, and Disintegration, 1989. His reunion with Robert Smith, though never exactly the same, became one of post-punk's oddest, most durable pairings, two contradictory individuals who couldn't exist without each other. After that, Simon Gallup has never left The Cure or talked publicly about what happened. It's not necessary for him because music has always been the answer. History-making bass lines from musical ascent. Simon Gallup's 1984 Cure return brought more than a fresh chapter. It began the band's greatest phase. He returned to his rightful place under those frightening bass riffs. Behind the bass, Robert Smith, and every spotlight, but at the heart of music. The 1985 Head on the Door began a transition that combined darkness with pop melody. Simon excelled on Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, 1987. On Why Can't I Be You, and Just Like Heaven, his bass lines were more than foundations. They became smooth, confident heartbeats that guided the listener's emotions. Not technical showmanship. The music came from gut, experience, and empathy. 1989 followed. Disintegration, The Cure's best album and Simon's best. Every track from Plainsong to Fascination Street, Pictures of You, and Love Song included rich, intentional bass patterns. Resolute, not hasty. It was a distinct sound, supporting and narrative, like Robert Smith's. Simon conducted Disintegration's sorrowful symphony invisibly. Anyone who's drowned in The Cure's music understands that without Simon, the band would never have existed. He needed simply the correct notes, not the spotlight, the appropriate depth, and everything else would fall into place. Simon maintained the band's backbone through Wish, 1992, Wild Mood Swings, 1996, and Bloodflowers, 2000, despite the tumultuous years that followed. He stayed while members came and departed and opponents questioned whether the therapy had lost its core. Statement-free, debate-free. He played one bass line, and everyone knew The Cure was alive. His job was to know how few notes he required, not how many he played. No school can teach it. It comes from sensitivity and a deep faith in music. To Simon, the bass wasn't supposed to impress, but to create room for the lyrics, emotion, and silence between storms. Therefore, he was never merely a bassist. He created quiet desire and moments that audiences could not identify, but felt through every inch of their being on evenings of tears and music. Personal life. Simon Gallup rarely discusses his personal life. There are no lengthy interviews about his feelings or family images in tabloids. For those who watched him long enough, it's apparent. His silence isn't retreat. His world's most sacred things are protected by it. He's married twice. Sarah Gallup, his second wife, was his calm companion during the long Cure years. She rarely appeared in public, but Simon's friends and crew behind the scenes knew Sarah as his refuge after every tour. In the noisy world of music, they lived quietly, easy, private, and validation-free. They had a son and daughter, who grew up with stability and sincerity while their father traveled the world. Simon never wanted his kids to be famous. His priority was accomplishing what you believe in, not admiration. Sarah died in 2019 after a protracted illness. The details are unknown. Simon appeared to disappear from the stage and quit commenting on social media. No press release, no public farewell, just a protracted stillness and an unfillable hole. Simon has returned to the stage with a heavier presence, less wild hair, and less wild eyes since that silent loss. It changed him irrevocably. He still plays the bass guitar, as if music is the only way to hold on to what's lost. Few realize that Simon nearly lost his career in 1992 when he developed acute pleurisy during a tour. He recovered from a health crisis and pain like he had never fallen. Standing on stage without speaking may have shown him that he was still alive, not given up. Over those years, Simon Gallup never used suffering to tell the story of loss, illness, or goodbye. He never begged for sympathy or showed distress. Instead, he let others hear and grasp his basis. An impact. Simon Gallup never wanted celebrity. He had no solo albums, did not compete for best musician, fashion icon, or generational spokesman. The bass was all he had, deep, thick, slow, like heartbeats striving to keep a lost soul in sync. That decision made him irreplaceable. For almost 40 years, Simon Gallup has grounded Cure's music. While Robert Smith wrote dreamy, delirious lyrics, Simon grounded the band with some of post-punk's most moving bass lines. Precision, timing, and depth, not flash. Without Simon's bass, A Forest, Fascination Street, Plainsong, Love Song, and Push would never have been masterpieces. He never overplayed, which is astonishing. Just enough, correct tone, perfect feeling, as if he instinctively knew where the music needed him and where quiet should speak. Later bassists from gothic rock to alternative, Joy Division to Interpol, Placebo, and the Smashing Pumpkins have hailed him a wordless teacher. He taught them restraint, rhythmic storytelling, and quiet persistence in a changing environment. Simon embodies one of rock's unique legacies: commitment, humility, and never leaving the band, even after his heart was broken. Simon received the most ovation when the group was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019. Robert Smith dropped his head in appreciation to the band members. Those who sobbed over collapse in religion or pornography knew one thing: they knew no Cure without Simon Gallup. That's perhaps the best definition of a legacy. Not what you say about yourself, but what others recall even when you never asked. Simon Gallup never needed the spotlight because it couldn't reach his music's depths. In 2021, Simon Gallup's quick Facebook post silenced the Cure's global fan base on an August evening. With a sorrowful heart, I leave the Cure. Good luck, everyone. Just below, he answered why with quietly laden words. I was tired of treachery. No one knows what happened. No response from Robert Smith. No band statement. Only extended, cryptic silence, in keeping with how the Cure had always worked. Rather than a dramatic goodbye, two guys who once understood each other deeply but had hurt each other the most broke up quietly. Simon returned months later, without warning, playing with Alice Bluegown at a tiny event and then with the Cure. Robert Smith briefly confirmed Simon's presence. Nothing more seemed necessary. Longest relationships frequently require only presence, not words. Simon performed on the Cure's European and American tours in 2022 and 2023, bringing tears to hundreds of thousands of fans who sang Pictures of You Again. Simon Gallup played these songs as reborn recollections more honestly than anybody else. After a 16-year hiatus, the Cure released Songs of a Lost World in 2024. Robert was the main songwriter, but Simon's dark, enveloping bass was there, like a permanent mark, never needed to assert his role. His musical sound conveyed everything. As the band prepared to release mixes of A Lost World and prepare for another tour in 2025, Simon was still behind the bass, as he had been for nearly 50 years. He never said I'm faithful, never defended his presence. The man didn't leave. Simon Gallup doesn't swear loyalty. It keeps playing after your heart breaks. His calm resilience makes him the Cure's silent, yet irreplaceable soul. Simon Gallup never embodied an era. His controversies, hardships, and bass skills weren't notable, but through calm presence and bass lines that mirrored the soul's darkest depths. A generation of the lost couldn't live without him as the remedy. Saying little was enough. The bass spoke for him. Simon Gallup chose to hold back in a society where everyone competes for attention and remains one of the most remembered. Not because he advanced, but because he never left. If you've ever listened to Disintegration on a sleepless night, found yourself in a forest, or believed that music can save through quiet loyalty and deep understanding, you may understand why Simon Gallup never needed to be a hero to become a legend. How do you view Simon Gallup's nearly 50-year journey? Any of his songs you can't forget? Leave a remark to celebrate a silent artist and to remind each other that sometimes silence is the deepest sound. Thanks for watching. See you next time for another story about musical legends who lived by truth, not fame.